everything you need to know about 1984 before you start reading the book. So 1984 was written after World War II had ended. George Orwell wrote it as a warning. It's a horrible vision of a society that should inspire this dread in his readers. But parts of what he wrote were visible in these harsh regimes and governments that were in the world around him and are still with us today, no matter when we're reading it. So although it was published in 1949, so that 1984 was in the future, even though we were reading it way past 1984 at this point, it still works as a warning of a future that we should all fear. It could just as well be called 2084 or 2184. So Orwell had tyrannical governments all around him in Spain and Germany and Russia. He wrote 1984 in a way that mirrored some of the politics and the conditions of these countries, where it was, total control, government control of everyday life. There was control of the media. There was starvation and rationing, just crushing of the human spirit and dignity, persecution and oppression of anyone that stood in the way of these leaders. And we still see that today, which is what continues to make this such a powerful book. Clearly, George Orwell hated the oppression that he saw in these governments. Orwell did not try to hide these connections, as his descriptions of Big Brother reveal this cross between Stalin and Hitler. He set the center of the story in London so that to many of his readers there was a familiarity in the setting to make the possibility all the more dreadful and terrifying. So 1984 is a dystopia. We usually hear the word utopia, which means an ideal society. So a dystopia is meant to depict a nightmarish society. It is not an easy read. For one, the vocabulary can be challenging, and the sentence structure is tense and densely packed. It's tiring and grinding to read, even out loud, much like Winston's life. Secondly, it's a world that has some shared history with ours, but has drastically changed not only in political structure, but also the political boundaries. So there are 3 ruling nations in the world: East Asia, Oceania, and Eurasia. And one is always at war with at least one other. So Winston, our main character, has no place to go and there's no escape. There are 3 classes in the society. There's the inner party, which is kind of like the ruling party and the smallest part of the population. There's the outer party, where Winston is a part of, which is under the authority and control of the inner party. And then there's the working class that are called the proles, which is short for proletariat. This is the largest and kind of unmanaged portion of the society. It's also the least powerful because they're not organized. They just kind of live life every single day, day to day, barely making it. There are other aspects of the society that Orwell creates that can be confusing, such as the 3 government agencies and what they do. Their names are contradictions, and the parties attempt to limit thinking by changing the vocabulary. It's very interesting stuff. Third thing that makes this book difficult is there's lots of philosophy discussed, both in Winston's head and between him and other characters, and it's not always easy to follow. Some of the concepts are deep and difficult. And last, some of the material and subject matter is harsh. It's very adult, quite brutal, and quite violent. Some of what you read is disturbing, and it's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be an assault on your senses. We're supposed to protest at what's happening. If the book doesn't bother you, then you've missed the point of it. I saw a t-shirt once that said 1984 was not supposed to be an instruction manual, and yet still in our world today, it's almost as though some governments are using it as such. So these are some of the key things to be aware of as you jump into the book and try to get a sense of the world that Orwell has created and what's going on. Good luck. Let's get going.